Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and today's video I am incredibly excited to share with you. I am going to be discussing and comparing the Chacoan system in Chaco Canyon, the Chacoan Great House system, and Cahokia in Illinois, which, what do these things have to do with each other? There's a lot of very interesting comparisons. Now, if you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe to my channel, I very much appreciate it. Helps me keep doing this. And I appreciate you watching and helping me, because this is helping me in a very special way. Now, about a year ago, I had cardiac arrest, 3 strokes. I died for 9 minutes. I came back, and it was hard coming back. I lost all my memories, I lost my vision, and I lost all my mobility. And I've been getting it back. And I've been having to retrace all of this historical information I used to know. The pathways are still there in my mind. The facts are there, but I have to retrace them. So doing things like this, figuring out and doing my own timelines and figuring out when things actually were, seeing how they overlap and drawing them out, like, this is actually fascinating. There's comparisons that people haven't made that I think are incredibly important and are not just out there in general discussion. So my hope is some of these thoughts and comparisons that you will share this with your friends and talk about it, because these are kind of discussions that historically and archaeologically should be had. So we're talking about two very ostensibly very different people. We're talking about the people of Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. Chaco Canyon is in what is today a very desolate area, and even when it was habited, was still comparatively desolate. These are harsh, dry deserts that are incredibly hot in the summer, so hot that please don't go visit Chaco in the summer. Do it in the fall, winter, or spring. And cold in the winter with snow. This is a hard way to live. By comparison, Cahokia was a community that was in Illinois, in kind of the Corn Belt, and right where the confluence of the Mississippi and the Missouri River come together and shoot out a floodplain of silt. All this nutrients and all these minerals coming from upriver fan out and have for millions of years into this floodplain. Very rich place to be doing agriculture. But we're going to compare both of these. So we're going to make some comparisons on what happened, the how, and the why, because even though these communities probably were not directly connected, I do think that some trade, person to person could have happened, not directly, but you trade to this people, then these people trade to Chaco, and these people trade back to Cahokia. I do think that happened based off of some of the trade goods we find. But their story is strikingly similar, even though they had a very different way of life. So let's start with Chaco Canyon. Chaco Canyon forever had people, all the way back to the Ice Age. And so did Cahokia. Maybe I'll just try to compare these two at the same time. I'll try to compare a point and compare the two. So Cahokia had archaic people, and then they've got the bow from the west, and they became the woodland people, and they were just kind of small, isolated hunter-gatherer communities with moderate agriculture. And the agriculture was mostly things like sunflowers and monk's weed and different things like that. Just some basic squash, okay? Some basic agriculture, but the people of what became Cahokia were mostly just hunter-gatherers, and these were kind of isolated communities. There wasn't a lot of trade going on back and forth necessarily, and agriculture wasn't a huge part. And at the same time in Chaco had also people there from the Ice Age, and then eventually they started getting corn up from Mexico, and they started to do moderate agriculture, and they had these small pueblos. These are pueblos that are adobe structures, and you have like 5 rooms and a kiva, 10 rooms and a kiva, 12 rooms and a kiva, and that's it. It's just like a little community, your little family, and the kiva is a center of ceremony and ritual and different things. These are small pueblos, and same thing. The homes that were to be had originally in the Cahokia area of these woodland peoples were normally either made out of tree bark. You cut a big old, like a hardwood tree, eastern hardwood tree, spread out the bark and make bark houses. They also would make earthenwork houses that you'd put a few posts in, and then you make earthenwork houses, and then you'd have a thatched roof. And these were the basics, okay? So this is a pretty simple way of life. Then around the same time, both of these exploded. In Chaco, we call it the Chaco explosion, and in Cahokia, we call it the Big Bang, because seemingly out of the blue, and we don't know what caused this. Was this a charismatic leader? Was this a cosmic event? What caused it? But somehow, suddenly, it's like, bam, we are doing a new idea and a new way to build a city, and we're going from 0 to 100 immediately. We're radically changing everything. We're radically changing our art, our food, our way of life, our social structure. We're going to have a hierarchy status, and we're going to do urban planning on how we are building, and we're going to do building at a colossal level that has never been seen, and we're going to, from scratch, invent a civilization at a rapid rate rather than a natural progression. It's insane. So again, this is roughly around 900 AD. And it's about 1000 AD, in Cahokia, did this start to happen. So again, basically going within 100 years. And I'm not saying these are related, but it's noteworthy that about the same time that there's people living here. You have Ice Age people doing their thing, and it gets to kind of like hunter-gatherers that are doing their own things in communities. And then at roughly the same time, blam! They both explode. Different sides of the country, different regions. One's like eastern hardwood forests and open floodplains, and the other one is like harsh deserts, but they both, blam, explode in this way. Now, we don't know really anything with Cahokia how this happened. And I have to say, I live in the West and in the Southwest, and our archaeology is incredible because it's dry here. In the East, you have two big problems. Number one, you have these hardwood forests, and these leaves fall down. It's very moist, it's very humid, and this leaf litter will build up and die and rot, and anything organic is going to fall apart. Anything standing is going to fall apart and just mold and rot. We even have the same problem with when you do like a time capsule. We have time capsules made from the 1800s, 1700s that people will open up and they're like, oh, the water has leached into this thing and ruined all the documents that were in it. It's a problem we have in the East that we don't have here in the West. So a lot of what Cahokia and that area had is gone because of that. But also, people who came over there were like, hey, we got to plow these areas, and we're just going to turn these areas into, farms and houses and just level it all. It's kind of sad. So you don't have as much. So we don't really know in Cahokia what was the cause, who came in. Was it a person? Was it a group of people who came in and said, all right, we're having a new identity, and it's a Mississippian culture is what we call it now, and bam, we're just doing this. We don't know what caused it, but we recognize very clearly it happened. So what did this look like? What did these two explosions look like at these two places that happened roughly the same time? Well, in Chaco Canyon, instead of having pueblos, suddenly you have Chacoan great houses, they're called. These are massive rooms. They're made facing rooms. These are massive structures with hundreds of rooms. They're usually made either like in a D shape, like a capital D, facing the rising sun. So they capture that solar radiation. They're hundreds of rooms. These are made out of adobe, where the adobe is, clay and stone stacked up in beautiful mortar. And that, there's as many as 5 stories tall. These are like apartments. And then in between you have logs. These logs we have found were cut at the Chushka Mountains 50 miles away and hauled on foot. Hundreds of thousands of logs to make the beams for the floors and the roofs on these places. Now, I did a video just on that trade and the lumber trade. So look up that. You can see that about in my channel. But this is incredible. This is this huge building structure, and we don't know why. We don't know how. Now, we do know a little more with DNA tests and some of the cultural tests and some of the things we know that were happening in Mexico. So it does seem that there were already people in Chaco, and then, around 900 AD, all of a sudden you start to have an influx of people coming in up from Mexico. And these are like post-Toltec people, it seems. These are people from the Toltec Empire and you have everybody. You have elitist classes, you have artisans, you have craftsmen, you have all different things. You have poor people, rich people, everything coming up. And it seems like, however this was done, that they're like, okay, we're doing this. We're basically doing a Mesoamerican type way of thinking. We're going to infuse this into your existing Puebloan ideas, and we're going to make this. And we're going to be treated like Chacoan lords. And so we know there was a ruling class And they had, whatever they did, they had the power to get people to build these massive great houses, that all of which had hundreds of rooms. We know that these people had the ability to get trade coming up from Mexico and Guatemala. We find in Chaco Canyon, we have shells from the Pacific Ocean, fancy shells. We have cacao beans for making chocolate that came up from the Puerto Vallarta region. We have turkeys that were brought up also from Mexico. We have live macaws, scarlet macaws, military macaws, and thick-billed parrots that were also brought up from Mexico. We find tons of these macaw skeletons there. Live macaws were kept and raised. This is incredible. Whoever these people were running Chaco had power and influence, and they could command people to do stuff. Hey, build me 500 new rooms. Okay, go 50 miles away and get, 700 logs to make this room. And people did it. Now, now we're going to compare that in Cahokia. Cahokia before, again, like I said, mostly there was kind of like an earthenwork house where they would put posts in and then they would just start to put adobe around. And it's called wattle and daub is the technique. People do it all over the world. And then do a thatched roof. Pretty simple. Well, all of a sudden, instead, they would dig a trench. And it was like a preform. These communities were massively planned as like, okay, we're gonna dig a trench. Okay, dig a trench, and these trenches were made, and they were normally square. Some of them were T-shaped from above. We don't know why, but you're gonna. So there were people who were just diggers. I'm just going to dig. This is what I'm going to do. This is my job. I dig trenches. So they would do prefab homes. And then you bring in the logs and put it in. And then you do the adobe. And then you do the thatched roof. So these were planned, massive planned communities. Now, the pottery changed immediately. There is some very specific incised pottery that became very popular. And it spread, and this was very indicative of this area. Just boom, explodes onto the stage out of the blue. And it is very much, this is Cahokian, and this is a trade item we see trading outwards. We also see what can only be compared to pseudo-Mesoamerican structures. Huge, enormous earthenwork mounds. These mounds were made, and they're not much to look at now because there's nothing on them, and gravity and water have taken effect, so they're just kind of bleh, they're kind of mounds. So these huge mounds. Now, we know the earlier cultures, such as the Hopewell culture. Hopewells, going back to like 700 AD, they were like 100 BC to 700 AD roughly is like the Hopewells. The Hopewells adopted the former Adena culture of the burial mound rituals, when the burial mound culture, which is you bury the dead and you build a mound over them, and then you bury more dead, and you make these big old mounds in your community of the dead with offerings. And there was also human sacrifice, where sometimes people were sacrificed with those more ancient cultures. Well, that idea, we'll get to those mounds in a second, but the idea of earthenworks was there. Well, all of a sudden in Cahokia, they're like, we're just going to make these massive step pyramids out of dirt. This is not easy. Nowadays we think, oh yeah, heap up some dirt. To do this, the man hours, these were done with baskets. You take baskets and you haul them over and you dump them. And where they dug out the dirt to do it today are giant ponds. This is a massive amount of work, and it wasn't just dirt. Where some of these have been excavated, this was planned. You're going to do this kind of dirt, then we're going to do this kind of clay, then we're going to do this kind of logs. And so these were structures. It wasn't just a pile of dirt. These were planned to have structural integrity. And these things were massive. These were the biggest structures north of Mexico. And these things were huge, hundreds of feet tall. Very similar to the step pyramids in Mesoamerica, but dirt. Now, there was a few types of these. Some of them on top would have elitist structures on them and ceremonial ritual platforms. This is amazing. We don't necessarily see anything like this in Chaco, although there are some, most of Chaco is unexcavated, and it's also mostly collapsed. And there are some reconstructions that do seem to make more of a step pyramid type thing. But the interesting thing is we have direct confirmed ties with Chaco to Mexico, and we know they even traded the whole time of the Chaco expansion. We had, you had a trade with Mexico. So you would expect to see Mesoamerican influence in Chaco. Cahokia, we don't necessarily have any direct connections from them to Mexico or Mesoamerica, but they look a lot more like Mesoamerica in what they're doing in their art styles and in their structures they're making, these pseudo step pyramids. It's fascinating. So they also did burial mounds as well. So we'll get more into those in a second. But the important thing is enormous mounds, huge communities. Now, it's disputed how many people lived there. Cahokia, the belief is there was up to maybe 20,000 at the height, 20,000 people. Chaco has the room and the space to fit that many people, but now people are kind of thinking that there were fewer people there and that it was just the elite royals and that there was people paying deference, kind of paying a tax, so to speak, and we know that there were rituals. So let's go into that. Both of these people were ritual centers. We know for a fact that these both had outlier communities. So the Cahokian system and the Chacoan system spread immediately. These huge Cahokia and Chaco boom exploded, and they immediately, like the Borg on Star Trek, started to spread this idea, this way of doing things in the form of their architecture, their belief system, their art, their way of life. This spread. So in Chaco, we call these outlier communities Chacoan outliers. And they made roads, maintained roads, some of them 40 feet wide with stone cobble to get back and forth between these Chacoan great house communities. And we know that at certain time of years, there were huge festivals that you got to come to Chaco proper, and we're going to have a festival. We're going to roast agave, and we're going to eat corn, and we're going to dance and get drunk, and who knows what. We're going to celebrate. We don't know what they did. We know there were agave roasts, but we don't know what they did at Chaco. But we know people came in. Maybe they wanted to. Maybe they were compelled to. It could be a very good thing, could be a very bad thing, but we know this happened at Chaco. We also know this happened at Cahokia. And the same thing at Cahokia, we see the older communities that became some of the first Cahokian outliers, that there are roads and pathways that were maintained, not to the level of the Chacoan roads, but these roads were maintained. All roads lead to Cahokia, all roads lead to Chaco. And we know that Cahokia had enormous ceremonies. And a lot of these ceremonies had to do with observation of what's going on up above. Both of these communities were masters of reading the stars, reading the heavens, reading the patterns, reading the strange patterns of Venus, and knowing when the summer solstices and winter solstice and the equinoxes were. Now, these things matter for a lot of reasons, but most importantly for planting. These both were communities that had to plant corn. They both of these became wealthy off of corn, most importantly. Corn is an incredible crop because you can grow it in excess. It's a high maintenance crop, but you can grow it in excess and then you just let it die on the stalk and you stockpile them up. So in the winter, you just take some of it, take it off the stalk, and grind it up into cornmeal. And you can make flour, tortillas, whatever. You can do whatever with it. So it's a reliable food source that doesn't require refrigeration. It dries itself with ease. Once it's dead and you've got it, it's low maintenance. You just stack it up, just keep the mice away and you're good. These two communities became fabulously wealthy because of corn. And both of these, in this time period, from about 1050 AD, to about 1200, rough, give or take, this is when you had incredible wealth going on and incredible water. It was a very watery time, but in both parts of the world. So these people both, we know they measured. In Chaco, we know how they measured and watched the stars in the heavens. We know in many of their kivas, their great kivas, they had light holes that would come in and go through and point to certain squares at certain times of year. It's kind of like on Indiana Jones with the Well of Souls, when he goes in and he's got the, not in the map room, not the Well of Souls, the map room. He goes in and he puts the headpiece of the staff on a stick and the light shines through and shows right where to go. It's kind of like that. And these things still work today. You still go there and it shows, and you can show what time of year it is. Also, up on top of Vallada Butte in Chaco Canyon, this big mesa, there is the Sun Dagger Rock. There's these rocks that fell naturally, and people found that during the solstice and the equinox, the sun would go through, and so they made a spiral, chiseled it into the rock. So that the sunlight would hit at the right time of year and would show through, so you could know when it is the equinox, or there's two daggers on both sides when it's the solstice, I believe. So they were following the heavens. It was the same thing at Cahokia. Cahokia had what is called woodhenge, which is this enormous set of logs that are set up in alignment with different communities and in alignment with the solstices and the equinoxes. And if you were there, like with the I think it's the summer solstice, that the sun would rise right from where you are standing, right in line with the biggest step pyramid, which is called Monk's Mound today. So it will be right in line with that. So you're going to see right where this giant step pyramid is that the elites live on, the sun at the summer solstice comes there. So you're associating your royal class with the rising of the sun, the summer solstice. The good times are here, right? So you had this in both communities, this deep understanding of the heavens, of the cosmos, and how things move. Now, with that, we got to say a couple things. What caused these communities to explode? What justified it to be like, yeah, we're going to follow along? Sure, some leader or some ruling class comes in and says, we're going to build a city. Okay, yes, sir. Why would you do it? What would you justify it with? We don't know. But there are a couple of things that are worth noting. Right in that time frame, we know at 1054 AD, there was a supernova, a Crab Nebula. A star exploded, it supernovaed, and it was so bright that you could see it in the daytime, day and night. You could see it day and night for weeks, and then for months after, you could see it at night. You can still see it today, but you got to look at it with a telescope because now it's diffused out. These people could see it, and we know this date 100% because the Japanese, the Chinese, the Arabs recorded it in written language, and we have those dates. They documented it, they explained it, so we know for sure when it happened. And I did a video just on that and how I think some of the petroglyphs that we see in the West are depictions of the Crab Nebula going off. It's pretty cool. Well, you also, roughly in that same kind of time frame, 1066 AD, Halley's Comet passed through. Now, this is an event. If you've never seen a comet doesn't zip by. It's there, and then the next night it's here, and the next night it's here, and it goes along. And this looks like a big old circle with a big old tail. It's a bright object. There are people, including me, who have suggested that there might be some sort of a connection with Halley's Comet to the Serpent Mound, which is also roughly in this area. Might be wrong. I'll have a separate video just on the Serpent Mound going into depth on that because that goes back even further. But having a comet, I mean, it looks like a snake. Right? It really does. And you can't help but wonder if these, for us, we're just like, oh, there's something pretty in the sky. These are people who are so intuitively connected to the natural world. When you go out today, you just see, oh, there's a bunch of stars. But if you start, I used to do a lot of astrophotography, and I would know where things were because I was planning my shots. And so you could tell me, like, hey, it's the middle of the day, where's Venus? And I'd be like, it's right there. And you pull out an app and you're like, oh yeah, you're right, it is. And you sense, where things are, even on the other side of the world. These people were that way to the extreme. They knew when and where and how. They had a sense of things. There was a natural order and everything was in its place. And if anything gets out of that place, it's radical, it's wild. If you have a supernova, that means something. If you have Halley's Comet coming through, whoa, what does this mean? It's a very interesting question, and it's one that we should at least factor in. We know this would have impacted their worldview, and we know this happened roughly that time period. It definitely could be that somebody trying to encourage a people, hey, follow this new idea, this new Chacoan explosion or this Big Bang of Cahokia. Hey, is it justified? You saw the sign in the heavens. You saw this thing. That's a sign that we're supposed to do this new way of doing things. Now, both of these communities began to decline by around 1150 AD. Now, both of these communities had people living there, and then boom, they both explode, and they do this thing, and then they start to diminish, and then there seems to be a lot of upheaval. And I'll talk about that in a second. But then they start to fade, and people are still living there, but much fewer people. People are leaving and or dying. And, by about 1200, 1300, these communities are just back to kind of what they were originally before. Now, part of the reason for that, we know in Chaco, is the mega drought. From 1130 AD to 1180 AD, there was a 50-year drought. Now, I'm in Utah, and here in the American West right now, we are in we're 25 years into a drought. Right now, we're in the third largest. There was the mega drought, and there was the giant drought that was, I got that 1278 to 1299. And this is the third largest. In the past 2,000 years, we are in the third largest drought we've had. So I kind of have a sense of a feel. I see what it's like out in the wild. I see the numbers of animals and plants going down. I see nature struggling. I see our birds of prey not breeding. So I can imagine what it would be like to have a much more extreme drought. This mega drought also impacted things in the east. It impacted temperatures, water flow, and this is an empire. The Cahokian system is built. It's the empire of corn. And corn is a very water intense and a very high maintenance plant to grow. High yield, but high maintenance. And if that gets changed at all, then this oversized community is going to collapse on itself. Same thing happened in Mexico. So you build on corn, on a monocrop, and you're not going to last because eventually something's going to change. So we don't know for sure. We know that that's kind of the part of what kind of made things collapse, because if things are good, you can tell the people, see, you know how you're paying deference to us and we're having a royal class and we're doing good? See, well, this is great. This is because the gods favor us. They favor our system. And then when that system starts to collapse, the people are like, hey, we're starving. This isn't working. We don't want to keep paying deference to you. And then that's when things start to go bad. Which brings to the violence. Both of these communities did incredible things that we look back on. We look back at these communities and we're impressed, we're amazed by all they did, by their art, by their trade routes, by their organization, by their sophistication, by their understanding of the heavens and the movements of the planets and the stars. We're impressed by them, we tout them, and we glorify them. The people living in these communities may not have felt that way. We know both of these communities had some extreme violence. We know that at Chaco Canyon there was slavery. There was a slave trade. A lot of these goods coming up to Chaco Canyon from Mexico were traded for slaves. The local Puebloan people were enslaved and traded back down to Mexico. It's a dark piece of history. I'm not going to be shy about it. That's just what the evidence shows. It just is what it is. People are people. And we have cannibalism in Chaco Canyon. We have the Turners did the work on this, and some people tried to do pushback just because they don't want to believe it. This is not cultural slander. Everybody in the world, every group of people in the world at one time or another have done cannibalism, either for ritual reasons or for survival reasons. Or for creating fear. Everybody's done it at one time or another. This is not a cultural slander. It's nothing to do with who you are. It's just sharing the facts. And we know that in Chaco Canyon, cannibalism was most definitely a thing. Now, this was also the case down in Mexico. And in Mexico, the human sacrifices and the cannibalism that happened in Mexico, nobody's afraid to talk about it. It's like, yeah, it's part of our history. Woo, cool, wow, wild times, But secondly, you cross that modern border into modern day United States, it's like, oh, that's cultural slander. No, it's not. It's just history. For whatever reason, it was nowhere near as widespread in Mesoamerica, but we know that the Chacoan elites, who are probably people who came up from part of that Toltec movement into this area, we know that they did cannibalism. And not widespread, and we don't, and mostly this happened during good times. This was not starvation cannibalism. This was cannibalism either as an elite activity, a ceremonial activity, or a control mechanism. If you're like, hey, here, our ruler's here, if you mess with them, they eat you. All you got to do is see a couple people get eaten and be aware of it, and it's like, oh, geez, don't mess with the Chacoan lords. Whew, wow. Okay, so in Cahokia, Cahokia, I have loved my whole life and I've studied it, but nowhere near in depth to the level that I've studied. I've dedicated decades of my life to Chaco Canyon and researching the Chaco explosion and the rise and fall and blah, blah, blah. I haven't done as much as Cahokia. I haven't even been to Cahokia in person yet. And the sad thing about Cahokia, if you go there, it's nowhere near as impressive looking as Chaco because it's so broad and so much of it no longer exists. Where Chaco, you can see it. It's right there. But Cahokia, we know there was violence. Much of Cahokia is unexcavated. But some of the smallest mounds that that weren't even on the original maps, they're so small that were excavated, show tons of human sacrifice. Mostly young women, and there's evidence they were strangled, and they were done in masses. Like, okay, we're going to kill these 30 girls, and then we'll lay them in a row, and then we'll put nice mats and offerings above them, and we're going to kill another 30 girls and lay them down there. We see this in many spots. Now, there's burials as well. There's elite burials with incredible wealth at Cahokia, and the same thing at Chaco. We have some Chaco burials that have just tons of turquoise beads and shell jewelry that's just out of this world, the wealth that some of these people had. Same thing in Cahokia. There's one that has, they call it the Thunderbird Chief because he had all these thousands of shell beads like laid under him in the shape of like a thunderbird, which seems to be one of the deity figures of Cahokia. So you had elite burials in both cases, but you also had sacrifice. We know you had we don't know if there was like, hey, Chaco, is there ritual sacrifice, like we're killing you in front of everybody to the gods, but we know there was cannibalism for sure, and there was slave trade. And having come up from Mesoamerica and having taken those ideas from Mesoamerica and trying to make a new thing, that's what you see. One of the most interesting ones at Chetroquetl at Chaco Canyon. There's a great house, and it has a colonnade. Now, a Mayan colonnades, I've done another video on this. Go ahead and look through my videos on that as well. Mayan colonnades were also signs of elite and wealthiness. And having this Mayan colonnade, the interesting thing is, after the fact, the people who stayed at Chaco filled in these doors. They filled them in. And it's like, we don't want to associate with this anymore. We see this during the fall of Cahokia too. We see buildings that were intentionally burned, and we see tools and things that were thrown in kind of like in pits. And if you talk today, there's really no oral history from the tribes of the South and the East today about Cahokia. It's like, how could there not be? This place was incredible. Surely there's some tradition still going on. Nobody talks about it. Why? I think Chaco gives the clue. Chaco was incredible, and for most tribes today, they're like, that was a dark place. We don't talk about it anymore. And they have legends, and they kind of summarize that a great gambler came up from Mexico, and he gambled away all the people into slavery and into, you're going to build me these houses, and you're building my brother this house, and you're going to build my brother this house. Some say that he used the datura plant, the seeds, the psychedelic plants of the datura plant, to trick the people and drug them and get them to sell away their lives. And that eventually the people revolted and were like, we're out of here, we're gone, and and they killed the great gambler. One version of the story, they killed the great gambler, and they buried his head in front of one of the great houses, and they went back to living on the other side of the river in their small pueblos. Another version says they loaded him into a giant arrow and shot him all the way back to Mexico. So in both cases, there is tangible evidence that there was kind of like an uprising and a turning away from these systems and a sense of, we're not going to talk about them anymore. In Chaco, the ancestors and the people who went through this will still say this. They'll say, we don't talk about Chaco. We call it White House. We don't talk about White House. Dark things happen there. We don't talk about it. Bad place. We're turning our backs on it. We're turning back on that way of art, that way of structure, that way of life, that way of architecture, and we're doing our own thing. And Cahokia, the assumption would be the same thing. Now, we know that the eastern tribes were encountering western expansion and more destruction. And so there's not as many people left to share those oral histories. But there is nothing. Nobody's talking about it. And again, the assumption would be where these two communities had kind of a same trajectory and a same explosion, and then kind of a same rise to height, and we have a ruling class and a commoner class, which is another thing I forgot to mention. We can tell from analyzing the bones and the what chemicals and biochemicals are still there, and the dentition on the teeth, we can tell if these are people who ate well or who didn't. All the elite burials in Cahokia, they're fat and happy. Their bones are great, their teeth are great. And the people who are sacrificed seem like they were poor. They had poor teeth, and their bone density shows they did not have a good diet. And also DNA tests show that they are not necessarily closely related to the elite burials. So these might be people from outlier communities who are brought in and ritually sacrificed, which seems to be the same thing that was happening at Chaco. So these two communities did the same thing, and it's worthy of note, it's worthy of comparison. Now, this is not an end-all, in-depth video about Cahokia or Chaco Canyon, but this is meant to give a comparison of these two and to generate more discussion about that comparison, because I think it's very noteworthy. And again, putting it also in the context of the supernova 1054 AD and Halley's Comet in 1066 AD and the Great Drought from 1130 AD to 1180 AD. These events influenced also what was happening with these two communities. Worthy of note. So I hope you enjoyed learning about these. I'll do more videos in depth on both of these communities as well, and facts about them. But I think it's worthy of note, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I would love to hear your perspectives, and if you've been to Chaco, if you've been to Cahokia, tell me about your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.